3 years ago, I lost my legs, my freedom, and I nearly lost my desire to live because of an accident. Yet, it also brought me someone incredible in a way I never anticipated. First, I want to express my gratitude to all my amazing subscribers. Your support allows me to share stories that explore the difficult, real aspects of life. This story is quite complex, so I hope you'll stick with me. The doctor told me I was lucky. Lucky that the semi-truck didn't completely crush me. Lucky that my spine wasn't damaged beyond repair. Lucky that my son, Jace, wasn't in the car with me that night. They used the term lucky, but it feels like a strange word for someone who can't walk more than 10 steps without severe pain. Our little house in Ohio felt too spacious when Jace was at school, but now it seems too small. He's always around, cooking for me, adjusting my pillows, and helping me into the shower when my muscles give out. He's my support, my rock. This is the unexpected part of becoming a parent at 16. One day, your child grows up. Jace has always been tall, but at 19, he has grown broad and strong. He works in construction, which has made his hands rough. His voice is deep now, and his eyes are a mirror of his father's, the man who abandoned me the moment the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. Mom? I jump when I hear his voice. Jace stands in the doorway with a bowl of soup. You didn't eat lunch. I wasn't hungry, I reply. You never are. He puts the bowl on my nightstand, noticing my expression. Your legs hurt today. I say nothing because he already knows. He always does. Without waiting for permission, he sits on the edge of my bed and rolls up my sweatpants. My breath catches in my throat as I look at the ugly scars, twisted skin, and jagged lines from all the surgeries. Can I? He asks, his fingers hovering above my legs. I nod. His touch starts off clinical as he kneads the stiff muscles around my knee. But then he finds a knot near my inner thigh, and I feel a rush of emotions. You're tense, he says softly. If only you knew, I whisper to myself. His hands move higher but stay just within boundaries that feel safe. The warmth of his touch takes away some of my pain, but when his fingertips brush my short's edge, my breath stops. He freezes, too. For what feels like a heartbeat, we both pause. Finally, he clears his throat and pulls down my pant leg. Better? Not quite, but yes. Thank you, sweetie. He seems to hesitate, as if he wants to say something more, but instead, he takes the bowl of soup and leaves. I stare at the ceiling, replaying those brief moments when his touch almost crossed a line. For the first time in years, I feel something other than pain, something exciting, yet frightening. The second time he touched me, I realized it meant much more than just caring for my legs. The morning light flooded through the curtains, maybe too bright for the turmoil in my mind. I hadn't slept at all. Every time I shut my eyes, I felt the memory of Jace's hands on me. The air felt warm, almost electric, as I tried to convince myself it was just a simple moment. A son helping his mother, a caretaker alleviating discomfort. But there was something different about how his touch made my skin feel. It wasn't just pain, it was something more intense. Suddenly, the creak of Jace's door down the hall pulled me back to the present. I quickly pulled the blanket over my lap, as if he could somehow read my racing thoughts. I heard his footsteps approaching, and soon his shadow filled the doorway. You're up early, he said, his voice still heavy with sleep. He stood there shirtless, wearing sweatpants that hung loosely on his hips. A tattoo wound around his ribs, one he had gotten last year without telling me first. I quickly looked away. I couldn't sleep. Thoughts of Lex kept spinning in my head. "No, it's you." I nodded in response, and Jay sighed as he came in and settled next to me like he did the night before. Without waiting for my permission, he pulled back the blanket and rested his hands on my bare calf. I couldn't help but flinch. "Sorry," he murmured, his hands cold against my skin. But it wasn't just the chill that made me tense. It was how his fingers pressed into me slowly, as if he were mapping out every curve. "You're tense everywhere," he noted softly. I swallowed hard, realizing that last night I could deny what was happening, but now, in the light of day, it was impossible to ignore. His thumb circled upwards, and his palm glided higher along the back of my thigh. "Jace, just relax." His voice was lower than usual. "You're pushing it away." But I wasn't resisting the massage. I was battling with how my body reacted to him. The way my breath hitched when his fingertips brushed the hem of my shorts, and how my stomach tightened every time he looked at me. Not as a son gazes at his mother, but rather with the appreciation of a man looking at a woman. Just then, a knock at the front door shattered the tension. Jace pulled back suddenly. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. I shook my head. He stood up, his muscles flexing as he stretched, and said, "I'll get it." I let out a shaky breath, still feeling the warmth of where he had touched me. I could hear voices from the living room. It was Mrs. Calloway, our curious neighbor, asking if we needed anything from the store. Jace politely declined, and I heard the door close behind him. When he returned, his face was hard to read. "Do you think she suspects anything?" he asked. My heart raced in response. "Suspects what?" He smirked, teasing. "That we still owe her for the casserole dish she lent us last month." I forced a laugh, though my hands were shaking. For a brief moment, it felt like he was alluding to something much deeper between us. That night, the rain pounded against the windows, and a storm knocked out the power, throwing the house into shadows. Jace lit some candles, their flickering light casting dynamic shapes on his face. He settled in next to me on the couch, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Are you cold?" he asked, to which I replied, "No," but I felt like a liar. He wrapped a blanket around us anyway. Our legs brushed against each other beneath it, and neither of us moved away. Outside, the wind howled, and a tree branch scraped against the roof like a nail across a chalkboard. His hand found mine, not by mistake, and not just a light touch. His fingers intertwined with mine, steady and confident. I should have pulled my hand away, but I didn't. The candle light made his eyes appear nearly black, hinting at warning, curiosity, and longing all at once. Suddenly, the electricity came back on with a loud buzz, filling the room with bright light. We jumped apart as if we had been shocked, but the tension between us remained. Just one kiss was enough to transform us into something completely different, something unexpected. That power outage had changed everything. For the next 3 days, after that moment on the couch, Jason and I behaved like strangers, polite, cautious, and longing for something more. I often caught him gazing at my lips while I spoke, and his hands lingered a bit too long whenever he assisted me in standing. Once, I turned quickly and found him inhaling the scent of my hair, which had brushed against his shoulder. We were like a fuse waiting to ignite. And then it happened on a Tuesday. Jace returned home from work, smelling of sweat and summer air. He kicked off his boots, and his white t-shirt clung to him, soaked from the heat. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing at my tense posture on the couch. "Just sore," I replied, forcing a smile after a long day. Without saying a word, he moved closer and lifted my legs onto his lap. A shiver went through me as he pressed into my calf. "You work too hard," he said softly. "He's the one who fixed our porch ramp all by himself when the insurance wouldn't help. You're the guy who carried me upstairs every night to my bedroom on the second floor," I thought. He pressed his thumb into a sore spot near my knee, and I stifled it. His hand found mine, but it wasn't a random brush or a light touch. His fingers intertwined with mine, strong and confident. I knew I should have pulled away, but I didn't. In the flickering candlelight, his eyes appeared deep and dark, holding a mix of emotions, like a warning, a question, and a silent plea all at once. Suddenly, the electricity came back on with a loud buzz, flooding the room with bright light. We sprang apart as if we'd been shocked, yet the connection between us didn't vanish. One kiss, that was all it took to transform us into something we never intended to be. The power outage had shifted everything. For the next 3 days after that moment on the couch, Jason and I moved around each other as if we were strangers. We were polite but cautious, both wanting more but holding back. I noticed him stare at my lips when I talked, and his hands lingered a bit too long when he helped me stand. Once, I turned sharply and saw him breathing in the scent of my hair, which had brushed against his shoulder. We felt like a spark waiting to ignite, and then everything changed on a Tuesday. Jason came home from work, smelling of sweat and the heat of summer. He kicked off his boots, his white t-shirt damp against his chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing at me, sitting stiffly on the couch. "Just sore," I replied with a forced smile. It had been a long day. Without saying anything, he walked over and lifted my legs onto his lap. My breath caught as his fingers pressed into my calf. "You work too hard," he said, sounding concerned. I wanted to remind him that he was the one who single-handedly built our porch ramp when the insurance wouldn't help. He was also the one who carried me upstairs every night since my bedroom was on the second floor. His thumb pressed into a tight spot near my knee, and I had to bite back a moan. "Shh," he said in a rough voice. "Just let me take care of you." But this wasn't simply care. It was desire. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened when my skirt shifted up. I could feel it in the tremor of his fingers as they crept higher. When his hand reached my thigh, I instinctively grabbed his wrist, and we both froze. I could feel his pulse racing beneath my grip. "Then tell me to stop," he said, like it was both a challenge and a plea. I knew I should have said it. I should have pushed him away, called a therapist, and pretended none of this had ever happened. But I didn't. I couldn't. So I released his wrist. His kiss wasn't soft. It was fierce, filled with fire and years of unfulfilled longing. His hands tangled in my hair as he pulled me closer. Our mouths crashed together as if that was the only way we could survive. I gasped against him, my fingers digging into his shoulders. We can't, I thought, but in reality, we already are. He bit my lower lip gently, sending shockwaves through me. You feel that? That's us. And, dear God, I did feel it, the hard press of him against my hip, and how my body instinctively leaned towards him like a flower seeking sunlight. This was so wrong, yet it felt impossibly right. As his lips moved against mine, a rush of desire surged through me, making me crave more. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. Instead, Jace pushed me onto the couch, his body pressing against mine while I grasped at his shirt. The collar ripped in my hands, but neither of us cared at that moment. "Look at me," he commanded with an intense growl. When I did, I was taken aback by what I saw in his eyes. This was more than just physical attraction. It was a deep, powerful love that could leave a mark, one that could break you. Afterward, as we lay intertwined in the quiet, reality began to sink in. Jace absent-mindedly traced little circles on my bare shoulder and asked if I was okay. I wanted to say yes, but I felt a mix of emotions. He could tell I was lying, just as I understood he felt no guilt about what had happened. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet it hit me hard. "I've wanted you since I was 15. My heart sank. This wasn't a random moment between us. It had been building all along. In that quiet, I felt the weight of unspoken truths. The morning light was harsh and overwhelming when I woke up before Jace. The reality of what we had done weighed heavily on me, almost like a physical burden. The sheets still held his scent, a mix of sweat and sawdust, something undeniably masculine. I couldn't shake the thoughts racing through my mind. What have we done? When he found me in the kitchen, lost in thought as I stared at the coffee maker, he softly murmured, "Hey," his voice scratchy from sleep. I couldn't bring myself to meet his gaze. I knew that his affectionate look was something that shouldn't exist between us. When he placed his hand on my shoulder, it felt comforting, yet so wrong, and I instinctively flinched away. The look of hurt that crossed his face affected me more deeply than anything else could. We spent the day moving around each other like planets in space. He would try to catch my attention, and his fingers would lightly brush against mine every time he handed me something. I kept pulling away, building walls between us with every quiet "thank you" and "could you please pass the salt?" By the time dinner was over, the air was filled with so much tension, it felt suffocating. "You're punishing me," he finally said, pushing his plate aside. "What am I protecting us from?" I replied. "From this," my voice quivered. "From how people would judge us if they found out. From the shame that could destroy us if we allowed this to go on." I could see his jaw clench in frustration. "I'm not ashamed," he replied, "but you will be." That night, I could hear him pacing in his room. The floor creaked under his steps, the sound getting louder in the quiet. Then there was silence. Suddenly my door clicked open. The moonlight spilled into the room as he stood there, shirtless, breathing heavily. "I can't pretend anymore," he said, his voice low and shaky. "Not with you." In that moment, my determination melted away because I felt the same way. We didn't need to say anything as he walked across the room. Each touch, every glance, and every breath we took spoke louder than any words ever could. This was the start of something we both knew was risky, but we were ready to dive in together. A year later, our neighbors still gossip about how close we are. "What a good son he is," Mrs. Calloway says at the grocery store. "He takes such wonderful care of his mother." I give a polite smile, adjusting the new wedding band on my left hand, the one that raises no questions, because single mothers just don't remarry, right? Jay's fingers intertwine with mine as we head to the car. No one gives us a second glance. No one has any idea, and that's exactly how we want it to be continued.